Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. If you're still here after all that, you already know the kind of stories we tell. The kind that crawl under your skin, that echo in the quiet when the episode ends. If you want to carry a piece of that darkness with you, wear what haunts you. Our exclusive line of merch is made for listeners who feel more at home in the uncanny, the unspoken, the things that don't make sense in the daylight. Shirts, hoodies, and other gear, designed with that same atmosphere of dread, mystery, and whispered wrongness. Candles support the channel, feed the stories. You can grab yours at https:// the shadows printify me, and as always, don't look behind you. The Weight of Red Clay, Chapter 1. The soil remembers. The dirt turned red 3 miles outside of town. It always did, like a line had been drawn across the land where God stopped watering and something older started feeding instead. Reed Mercer downshifted the old Ford and watched the asphalt fade into gravel, then mud, then clay. Wet, even in June, even after 10 days without a storm. Thick enough to hold onto the wheels a little too long. He'd forgotten the smell. Clay had a memory to it, bitter, like old pennies and sweat, with just enough sweetness to feel wrong when it settled in your mouth. He pulled off the road when he saw the sign. Welcome to Sullen Ridge, blessed by the hands that came before half the letters were chipped away, but the message held. This was where Graham had come, or vanished rather. Reed rolled down the window and killed the engine. Crickets, stillness, no birdsong, no wind. He stepped out, boots crunching against dry straw and soft earth. The heat hit him low and heavy, not sun heat, but ground heat, like the earth exhaled its secrets just for him. And behind that heat, something faint, a hum, not sound, vibration. He pressed his hand to the ground, and the soil pulsed once beneath it. Hell of a place to retire, he muttered. The only reason he even knew about Sullen Ridge was a postcard. No return address. Just a photo of a wide brick wall curling in on itself like a fossilized snake. Someone had written 2 words on the back, "He's here." The postmark was from Georgia. Rural. No highway access. No official incorporation on USDA land records since 1974. But Reed had once written the soil reports for counties like this. He knew the signs. Red clay meant iron oxide. Good for tomatoes, bad for secrets. He slammed the truck door and started walking. The town appeared like a mirage, sudden, soft-edged, too quiet. A row of low houses stretched along a loop road. No fences, no driveways, just porches, rocking chairs, and white cotton sheets drying slowly in the sun. No music, no cars, just that low, pulsing hush beneath the ground, steady as breath. At the center of town stood the wall. 12 feet tall, made of red clay brick, smooth and clean and wet-looking despite the heat. No gaps, no gate, just a single vine of white morning glory curling its way up one corner. Reed stared at it for a long time. Something about it made his jaw ache. He ran his fingers along the brick. It was warm, damp, and soft, not crumbling, not unfinished, just living, like the clay wasn't cured, like it had never truly dried. "Help you, stranger." Reed turned. The voice belonged to a man maybe 60, clean-shaven with sun-wrinkled skin and eyes too pale to trust. He wore a tan shirt tucked into old jeans and a braided leather belt that looked handmade. Reed nodded politely. "Just passing through, looking for someone." "You're not the first to come looking," the man said, "but you might be the last to leave." He said it kindly, but it wasn't a joke. Reed extended a hand. "Reed Mercer." The man didn't take it. "Elbridge, you can call me Brother L." Reed let the hand drop. "I'm looking for my brother, Graham Mercer. Came out here a year ago. Said he was settling in. Haven't heard from him since." Brother L scratched his chin. "Lot of folks come to Sullen Ridge to put down roots. Sometimes they don't send letters. Clay doesn't have much use for mail." Reed raised an eyebrow. "But he's here." Brother L gave a slow nod. "All who come stay, one way or another." And then, as if on cue, a bell rang somewhere deeper in town, low and iron and dull. Brother L turned toward the sound. "Kiln night's coming," he said. "You'll want to get inside. It gets warm come sundown." Reed stepped forward. "I'd like to see my brother's house." Brother L paused, then pointed toward the edge of the inner ring. "Third home on the left past the orchard. You'll know it. His name's on the stone." Reed frowned. "What stone?" But Brother L was already walking away. It took him 15 minutes to find the house. It was smaller than he remembered. Porch sagging slightly, a basket of vegetables wilted on the steps. A rocking chair shifted slightly in the windless air. And on the ground, beside the steps, a slab of raw red clay, soft as bread dough. Pressed into it before it dried were 2 letters. GM. Reed knelt down. And there, half sunken into the corner of the clay, barely visible in the light, was something metal. He dug with his nails and pulled free his brother's wedding ring. Still warm. Chapter 2, The Bricks Know the Name. Reed didn't sleep that night. He sat on the porch of Graham's house, the ring still gripped tight in his fist, thumb rubbing the metal raw. He kept staring at the imprint in the clay slab, the 2 letters G and M pressed deep, too deep for a casual mark. It had been done with purpose, with ceremony. When the ring finally cooled in his palm, he realized something. It wasn't just warm from the sun. It had been inside the clay for some time, and yet the clay hadn't hardened around it. The whole block was still damp, malleable, as if the air here refused to let anything truly dry, as if the clay had its own breath. Just before dawn, he heard it, a low sound, almost beneath hearing, not quite humming, more like whispered pressure. It came from the wall that circled the town. It was pulsing, like something behind the bricks was shifting, not scratching, not moving, but settling. And with each breath, it echoed that same rhythm he felt in the dirt the day before. Bar dump, bar dump, bar dump, a heartbeat. By morning, the town was already moving. People swept clay dust from their porches. Some carried baskets of corn or squash to a long open-air table at the town's center. Children ran barefoot, their skin caked in dried orange-red dust. Everyone was preparing. But for what, no one would say. Reed wandered toward the wall. He counted the bricks. Each was handmade. No stamps, no standard sizing. Some were slightly bowed, others etched with symbols, initials, or simple carvings, suns, leaves, open palms. None were identical. He stopped when he found another name he recognized. Graham Mercer etched into the side of a still damp brick near the base. It looked like it had been drawn in with a thumb. The lettering was crude, fresh, too fresh. Reed reached out. His fingers sank in just slightly. Not enough to leave a mark, but enough to feel it, warmth, pressure, and beneath that something hard. He pressed gently into the mortar between the bricks and pulled out a tooth. "Something catch your eye," the voice came from behind. Reed turned. A woman stood in the road, hair wrapped in a clay-smeared scarf, apron flecked with bits of red silt. Her eyes were sharp, kind but wary. "I'm me," she said, offering a hand. "You must be Graham's brother." Reed hesitated, then took it. "I am, you knew him," she nodded. "Quiet man, but kind. Worked the garden plot just fine. Last I saw, he was bringing tools to the kiln." Reed squinted. "The kiln?" Me glanced to the west side of the wall. "Big dome-shaped building near the old pecan grove. We hold the fire there. It's where new families join." He stepped closer. "Join how?" Me smiled, the kind of smile people give when they're about to lie or confess, and they haven't yet decided which. "The earth remembers us better when we give it all we are." Reed didn't respond. Me didn't wait. "You should come to kiln night," she said, turning to go. "It's the season of root. We're preparing new bricks. It'd be good for you to see." "What do you put in them?" he called after her. Me paused, turned, and said almost sweetly, "What do you think makes soil grow so rich around here?" That night, Reed crept out alone. He followed the path Me had pointed out, past the pecan grove, where the trees stood thick and gnarled with blackened roots, down a slope where clay pooled in natural pits. At the bottom stood the kiln. It was massive, 30 feet wide, shaped like an old beehive. The smoke that rose from it wasn't dark, but pale gray, sweet-smelling, familiar. It reminded him of home. He waited in the brush, heart pounding. Then they came. 10 robed figures carrying long wooden trays. One by one, they filed into the kiln. The last 2 figures dragged something heavy between them. A tarp, lumpy. Something shifted beneath it. Reed leaned forward. and stepped on a dry branch. Snap! The sound was impossibly loud. All 10 heads turned toward the trees, and one of them stepped forward, pulled off the hood. It was me, eyes full of flame. It's rude to miss your own joining, Mr. Mercer. Chapter 3. Beneath the kiln, they didn't run at him. They didn't shout. They just came forward, calm as crows, and took Reed by the arms. The red-robed figures dragged him down the slope with practiced ease, boots carving lines through the clay like he was already part of the soil. The closer they got to the kiln, the more the air pressed inward. It was hot, but not in the way Reed expected, not the dry, burning heat of a bonfire. It was dense, humid, like the inside of a throat. The smell grew sharper, clay and smoke and something else, something sweet. The kiln's mouth yawned wide, its opening barely 6 feet high, reinforced with rough timber beams charred black. Symbols had been carved above it, circles inside circles, lines radiating outward like roots. They dragged Reed inside. The heat swallowed him whole. Inside, the walls pulsed a dull red, not fire, not flame, but the memory of it. The stones were radiating history, not just heat, and Reed could feel it sinking into his skin, his teeth, the spaces between his ribs. Dozens of bricks were stacked in concentric rings, drying in the sweltering air. Each one marked, each one named. He squinted. Blood swam behind his eyes. The heat was making his vision shimmer. No, not shimmer, shift. The bricks moved, not physically, not yet. But they vibrated like something beneath them was stirring, restless. Then Me appeared from the smoke. Not wearing a robe now, just a work apron, streaked with soot and clay. Her hair was unbound, falling limp with sweat. She knelt in front of Reed. "I told you," she said gently. "The clay remembers," Reed coughed. His throat was scorched raw. "I saw his name," he croaked. "Graham, you put him in the wall," Me smiled. "No, he put himself in the wall. He joined us." She looked around the kiln, eyes glassy. "This is where we give back, where the body becomes harvest. The heat isn't just to shape the bricks, Reed. It's to bake memory into the land. Every time the rain falls, every time the ground drinks, it drinks us, and we grow." Reed struggled to his feet. The figures didn't stop him, they just watched, heads tilted like dogs listening for thunder. He staggered to one of the unfinished bricks, touched it. It was wet. And inside, beneath the clay, something resisted. Soft, fibrous. He dug in with his thumb. It came away dark red. Hair, human hair, still warm. "You're making people into bricks," he breathed. Me rose beside him. "We're becoming more than people. What we sow here lives forever." She reached out and touched his chest, and for a moment he felt it. The soil, miles of it, beneath him, around him, every grain packed with memory, with identity. "Graham didn't just die here," she whispered. "He lives here, in the fields, in the walls, in the mouthfuls of corn chewed by children who never tasted hunger." Her voice darkened. "And now you've come to finish the ring." Reed staggered back. "The hell I have." He turned, making for the kiln's mouth, but the robed figures blocked the path now, shoulder to shoulder, blank faces hidden in red hoods. Behind him, Me began to hum. And then she called to them, "Take him below. He must see." There was a trapdoor in the floor of the kiln, hidden beneath a ring of drying bricks. They pulled it open, revealing a narrow, spiral staircase carved into the clay itself. And with rough hands and unspoken orders, they dragged Reed downward, not into the earth, but into something deeper, something hungrier, something that had been waiting beneath the fire for a very, very long time. Chapter 4, The Seed Vault. The staircase wasn't stone. It was packed earth, clay compressed so tight it squeaked underfoot. Moisture wept from the walls in long, red tears. With every step downward, the heat faded, but the weight grew. Not just the weight of soil, but something psychic, like memory layered so thick it pressed down into the marrow. Reed's breath came shallow. The air was dense, iron-heavy, and stank of rust and something sweet-rotted, like syrup left in the sun. The robed men said nothing as they led him. Their silence was total, not reverent, but trained. These were not first-timers. They knew what lay below. When the steps ended, they opened into a chamber. Massive, oval, the ceiling barely 10 feet high, arched like the inside of a ribcage. Lanterns hung from wires strung like vines. Their glow was soft, golden. And the walls were made of bricks. but not like the kiln above. These were older, each one pressed with thumbprints, some bearing initials long worn smooth by time, others still glistening as if the clay had never fully dried. Between the bricks, something grew. Roots. Long, pale, worm-like tendrils that twisted in and out of the mortar, pulsing faintly. Some ended in small, gourd-like bulbs. Others pierced deeper into the earth. They moved. Reed's voice cracked. "What the hell is this?" One of the men stepped forward and handed him a lantern, not forcefully, just offered it, like a father giving a child the chance to see for himself. So he walked. The light revealed carvings, not just on the bricks, but in the clay floor itself. Circular patterns, repeating symbols, open palms, weeping eyes, seeds with tendrils. At the center of the chamber, the floor dipped into a basin. A single stalk stood growing from its center, not a plant, not quite. It looked human. A torso ribbed with roots stretching upward. No arms, no head, just a trunk red and wet and gently swaying with breath. Reed recoiled. "Jesus," Mee's voice floated down the stairs behind him. Calm, maternal. "Not God. This is the first sower." He turned. She descended slowly, hands clasped in front of her. She was buried in this clay before time had name, before words grew teeth. She gave us the seed, the true seed, blood and memory. Her body became the first root. Her breath still feeds the soil. Mee stepped up to the basin, kneeling beside the stalk. "And we feed her in return." Reed shook his head. "This is insane. That thing," Mee looked up. "That thing is what makes this land sacred. Your brother understood. His bones are in the bricks now. His memories water the harvest." She reached into a small stone bowl at the base of the stalk, pulled out something red, soft, pulsing, a clay capsule, no larger than a walnut, carved with his initials. "RM, you don't have to die, Reed. You just have to join." He backed away. "No, you people, this whole place, it's built on sacrifice. You're not farmers, you're cannibals." Mee rose. Her eyes glowed in the lamplight, not magic, not supernatural, just sure, unblinking. "Absolute, we are farmers. We just learned long ago the best harvest comes from within." Suddenly, Reed felt lightheaded. The air thickened again. He looked down at the capsule in her hand. It pulsed once, and behind his eyes, something opened. Not a memory, a feeling. A sensation of falling into the ground, not physically, but spiritually. Like his blood was seeping downward, into the roots, into the bricks, into the warm, wet breath of something that had waited a long time to taste him. Reed dropped the lantern. It shattered. Darkness surged. In that moment, the stalk bent. Its tip leaned toward him. The clay pulsed. And somewhere beneath his feet, the bricks began to hum. Chapter 5. The Root That Remembers. Reed ran. He didn't wait for Mee's voice to stop echoing. He didn't wait to understand what the stalk was or why it swayed when she whispered. He just ran up the clay steps, slipping once, scraping his knuckles bloody on the packed red earth. The humming followed him, not loud, not violent, but persistent, like a tuning fork vibrating through his bones. By the time he burst through the trapdoor, the kiln above was empty. No figures, no Mee, no fire. Just the glow of half-dried bricks and the stink of clay that had been fed. He staggered outside. The sky was still dark, the stars buried behind a dense smear of low cloud. Windless, oppressive. He didn't head toward Graham's house. He turned away from town. He aimed for the wall. When he reached it, his legs were shaking. Not from exhaustion, from something deeper, a weight that wasn't his. The bricks seemed taller than before, wetter. He pressed his palm to them again as he had when he first arrived, and the wall pressed back. It knew him. The clay remembered. He walked along the perimeter, looking for any weakness, any missing brick, any place where the red earth had been broken, but there was none. The wall was seamless. It didn't end. It curled inward, a perfect ring. No gates, no exits, only names. He found Jim again, his brother, still damp, still warm, still present. Next to it, in smaller script, something that hadn't been there before. RM, his own initials, pressed into a brick that was only half finished. Reed stepped back. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He turned to run, and froze. There was a child standing in the road, barefoot, mud to the knees, maybe 7 years old. Her hair was thick with clay dust, her dress handmade and sun-bleached. She held something in her hands, an effigy, made of mud and straw, shaped crudely like a man. It was dripping wet, as if freshly molded. She held it out to him and said in a voice too calm for her size, "You already joined. The root knows your name." He didn't take it. He stepped around her and bolted for the trees. Behind him, the child called out one final time, not pleading, not angry, just stating a fact. The seed goes in the ground whether it wants to grow or not. He ran for what felt like an hour, through trees that leaned inward, through clay that clung higher and higher up his legs with each step, thickening, sucking, until finally he collapsed. There was no wind, no animal calls, just his own breath wheezing through clenched teeth and the dull throb of something ancient in the soil around him. He crawled to the base of a fallen pecan tree and leaned his head back. He tried to wipe his face, but when he looked down, his hands were red, not from blood, from clay. It was under his nails, in his paws, smeared behind his ears, packed into the corners of his eyes. He opened his mouth to scream and tasted earth. Wet, alkaline, familiar, like he'd eaten it before, like it had always been inside him. Then he heard something move beneath the roots. The ground didn't shake, it sank, just slightly, like something big was shifting beneath the surface, sliding closer, listening. A voice rose with the breath of the trees, low, rusted. Memory doesn't die in the ground, it takes root. Reed stood and realized he couldn't hear the birds or the wind, or even his own heartbeat anymore. All he could hear was the slow pulse of the land and the whisper of names in clay. His name, over and over. Chapter 6, Kiln Night. Reed didn't remember walking back into town. The red clay clung to his clothes like wet paint. His boots had been sucked clean off somewhere in the forest, his feet red and raw. The sun was just beginning to set, and with it, a copper glow bled across the horizon like fire behind a dirty lens. The town was waiting, not behind doors, not watching from windows, out in the open, in a wide crescent around the kiln. Men, women, children, all dressed in fresh robes the color of rusted blood. Each wore a piece of clay jewelry, rings, necklaces, pendants shaped like seeds or open palms, the same symbols from the vault below. And in the center of it all stood me. She no longer wore the apron. Now she wore a robe with a sash dyed a darker red, nearly black, the color of something that had burned but refused to disappear. Reed limped into the center of the crowd. No one stopped him, they simply parted, and me smiled. "You came back." Reed wiped a smear of clay from his lips. "You put something in me." Me tilted her head. "We fed something in you. The clay was already yours. It only needed water." He swallowed hard. "You're going to kill me tonight." She shook her head. "No, you are going to offer yourself. Or you are going to walk. That is the covenant." Reed laughed. It came out cracked and bitter. "There's a choice." Me stepped forward. "Always." She raised a hand, and two men brought forward a long, flat tray. It held a brick, damp, blood-warm. On its surface, etched deeply, were his initials. RM, and just beneath, pressed into the corner like a maker's mark, was a tooth. His tooth, the one he'd lost in a bar fight years ago. How they had it, he didn't know, but the brick knew him. "You take memories," he said. "You grind them into brick, into mortar." Me nodded. "Memories feed the harvest. Identity is the most fertile soil there is." She gestured to the kiln, now glowing from within. The dome breathed slow, steady heat. Smoke curled upward in perfect silence. This is not a fire that devours. This is a fire that preserves. The body becomes seed, the name becomes rain. Reed looked at the crowd. Not a single face looked afraid. Some looked hopeful, others resigned. A few even smiled. He stepped toward the brick, put his hand on it. It was soft. It breathed. He felt his name vibrating beneath his skin, traveling up his arm, crawling through the roots of his nerves. And behind his eyes, the world dimmed, just for a moment. He saw a boy walking through fields of red grass, his mother planting a sprig of basil, his brother's hand reaching through soil, pulling free a single red tomato that pulsed like a heart. He saw himself, laying down in the dirt, and smiling. He jerked back. No, the visions snapped like twine. The crowd didn't flinch. Me's smile didn't waver. Reed backed away. "You're not preserving memory," he said. "You're eating it. You're feeding something that doesn't sleep." Me stepped forward. It's not eating. It's becoming. We're part of the soil now, Reed. And soon you'll be more than just man, you'll be seed. The kiln roared suddenly, a deep, inhaled sound, as if the flame inside had finally found its lungs. The crowd turned. The time had come. Mee reached out her hand, offering it to him. You can lie down now. Let go. Or you can walk into the woods and never speak your name again. But if you stay, the clay will remember. Reed stood at the edge of the firelight, his face slick with sweat and earth, the brick still pulsing on the tray beside him. And somewhere in the kiln, something inside the flame whispered his name again, not with hunger, but with familiarity, as if it knew the shape of him, the flavor. Chapter 7. The ones who walked away. Reed turned from the flame. He didn't speak. He didn't run. He simply walked past me, past the circle of believers, past the tray where his brick still breathed faintly beneath the heat of the kiln. No one stopped him. No hands reached out. No cries of betrayal. No fire rose to claim him. The people simply stepped aside and let him go, as if they already knew, as if they'd seen this before. By the time he reached the edge of town, the trees swallowed the sky. The moon was half hidden by thick black clouds, and the red clay had given way to root-choked soil and tangled underbrush. He didn't know where he was going, just that it had to be away, away from the wall, away from Mee's smile, away from the fire that spoke his name like a prayer. An hour passed, then 2. The deeper he went into the woods, the quieter it got. No wind, no insects. Only the soft squelch of earth underfoot and the faint, rhythmic beat that he thought he'd left behind. But it was still there. Bar dump, quieter now, but never gone. He stopped when he saw the first hut. It was little more than a frame of branches covered in hide and moss. Smoke rose from a small hole in the top, and the scent, sharp, clean, acidic, strung his nose. Not firewood, not clay, something else. Cleansing. A figure stepped out of the shadows. A woman, maybe 60, wearing patchwork clothes, no shoes, a necklace of bones and copper wire. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him. "You're bleeding," she said. Reed glanced down. His hands were red, but not from clay. From where he'd clawed at his arms, trying, maybe unconsciously, to scrape something out of himself. She beckoned him inside. The hut was low-ceilinged, lined with jars and wooden bowls filled with herbs, oils, and small totems shaped like eyes, hands, and circles struck through with lines, the opposite of the symbols carved into the bricks in Sullen Ridge. Counter-charms, wards. "I'm Ruth," she said softly. "One of the walkers." Reed stared. "You left," she nodded. "Long time ago, before Mee wore the sash, before the kiln ever breathed." She poured him something from a dark bottle. He didn't ask, he drank. It burned going down, tasted like bark and blood and fire gone cold. "I thought if you leave it lets you go," he said. Ruth smiled, not unkindly. "You can leave the town, but once the clay knows your name, the land grows toward you." She showed him a scar on her collarbone, shaped like a root, jagged and red. "You'll see it too. In time, the vines always reach." He leaned back, dizzy. "What do I do?" Ruth was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "There's a place deeper in the forest, where the clay thins, where the ground turns to stone. The memory doesn't grow there, but it watches." Reed frowned. "Watches?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she opened a small pouch and handed him a pale stone. Etched into it was a spiral counterclockwise. "Plant this where the earth can't bleed, and don't look back once it takes root." Reed left at dawn. Ruth didn't follow. She simply watched from her doorway, a clay knife in her hand, and a look in her eyes that said you'll either make it back or become part of the forest. As Reed disappeared into the trees, something in the wind shifted. A scent of ash, a whisper that trembled beneath the leaves. "We remember you, Reed Mercer. You were made in us." Chapter 8. Stone beneath the root. Reed walked until the trees began to lean backward. It was subtle at first, a slight arch in the trunks, but soon the pines grew warped, curling upward in crooked half-loops, their bark split and puckered like old scars. The ground beneath his feet changed too. The damp stick of clay gave way to brittle soil and exposed stone. For the first time in days, the earth stopped breathing beneath him. Here, the land didn't hum. It watched. The birds returned. Not many, but enough to remind him what silence had stolen. The air had bite again. Dry, mineral-heavy, no longer sweetened by rot. Reed followed a narrow game trail until it ended at a clearing ringed by flat grey rock. The trees thinned, the canopy pulled away like parted lips. In the center stood a mound of stone, just a few feet high, covered in moss, ancient, unmoving, unmarked, but unmistakably unnatural. Reed stepped forward. The pendant Ruth had given him, the pale spiral stone, throbbed with cold against his chest. He crouched beside the mound. This was it, the place where the clay couldn't grow. He cleared a patch with his hands, brushing away debris until he found raw, cold rock. No roots, no cracks, just slate, smooth and veined with black. He took the pendant and set it gently into a small hollow in the stone. It fit perfectly. The cold stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a breeze kicked up sharp and sudden. The spiral stone darkened. Hairline fractures crawled across the surface of the mound, and a sound like a deep sigh rolled from the ground beneath. The forest stilled. Then the whispers began, not from around him, from beneath. This is not yours. He bears the mark. The name was planted. The voices were wrong, layered, inverted, like echoes folded through wet cloth, but they weren't malevolent, just old, dry and cracking like paper left in the sun. They spoke in warning, in recognition. Reed fell back. His palm struck the bare stone, and for a moment he saw, not a vision, not a hallucination, a memory not his own, a field, open before the town, before the kiln. A woman weeping as she buried something in the stone, not to grow it, but to bind it. The seed, the first seed. It hadn't been sacred. It had been sealed, to keep it from touching soil again. The voices swelled. Clay is hunger. Clay is longing. Clay is us. Then silence. The pendant cracked, and the air turned sour again. Something had woken. Reed backed away. Behind him, the trees groaned. He turned just in time to see a root, thick, red and glistening, rise from the forest floor, writhing like a vein torn free. Another followed, then another. They weren't growing from the ground. They were reaching toward him. He ran. Branches tore at his skin. The sky had turned orange, and the wind carried the scent of wet brick and burnt hair. The forest chased him, not with sound or flame, but with recognition. He was no longer anonymous. The clay knew his name, and now the stone did too. He didn't stop running until the trees parted again. In the distance, through the haze, he saw Sullen Ridge. The kiln, the wall, smoke already rising. The final ring ready to close. Chapter 9. The ring completes. By the time Reed reached the edge of Sullen Ridge, the sun was dying behind the trees. The sky churned orange and copper, the color of oxidized blood. Smoke drifted in low spirals across the fields. The whole town vibrated with a stillness so thick it felt like being inside a throat just before a scream. The wall was sealed now. Where there had once been a narrow break, a barely visible entrance between two uneven brick stacks, there was now a single stone, freshly laid, still glistening. The mortar around it hadn't dried, and carved into the surface in uneven, trembling script, R.E.I.D. Mercer, the final seed, no, he whispered, voice cracking. He ran a hand across it. It was warm, almost hot. The brick pulsed gently beneath his fingertips, like something beneath it was breathing. He pressed harder. The brick gave slightly, not like soft clay, but like flesh that had learned to wear stone. Behind him, the town bells began to chime. Low, slow, 6 times, then silence. Then came the hum, that same heartbeat rhythm he'd heard since the first night, but louder now. The whole ground was throbbing. The kiln roared to life at the heart of the town, smoke coiling up in thick, unnatural plumes. It wasn't burning wood. It wasn't burning anything human. It was burning memory. Reed moved fast, ducking through the alleyways behind old clay-stained homes, skirting open windows and quiet porches where people sat unmoving, eyes closed, lips whispering old hymns beneath their breath. He passed the garden Graham had once tended, overgrown now, but still thick with tomatoes and squash and long tendrils of creeping green that shuddered faintly when he passed. They knew him. Everything did. Mee stood at the center of the gathering. Her sash was gone. She wore only the red, and beside her stood the brick, the one with his name. Set on a wooden pallet, half-dried, its center sunken just enough to suggest something had once been inside it and might still be. Reed stepped into the light of the kiln. Me turned, unsurprised. "It is time." He shook his head, voice shaking. "I didn't choose this." She stepped forward. "You were chosen. The land remembered you before you were born. This isn't death, Reed. This is inheritance. You are the root that completes the ring." He stepped toward the brick. It steamed gently in the night air. "You can't keep doing this," he said. "You're not preserving people, you're eating them. You're building a prison out of bone and memory." Me didn't flinch. "You think the world above is free?" she asked. "You think it remembers you? No, it forgets the moment you're gone. Here, you feed generations. You become the foundation." She placed a hand on his shoulder, and for just a moment he saw through her eyes. Bricks stacked in long, silent tunnels beneath the ground, each one humming faintly, alive with the voices of the past. Each one a mind preserved, each one a soul woven into the red. He tore away. "No," he gasped. "I won't be planted." But the ground had already begun to rise beneath him. The clay wanted him. The brick with his name began to crack, not from damage, but from something inside it waking. Reed turned, ran, and the wall rose behind him. The town closed, the ring completed. Me's voice carried on the kiln smoke. "You can run, Reed, but the clay remembers, and the clay always calls home its own." Chapter 10. A body beneath every brick. Reed returned to the kiln alone, under cover of a moonless night. The sky hung black and heavy, as if mourning or bracing for something sacred to fall. The brick wall at the town's edge had closed behind him, a perfect circle. But Ruth had taught him another way in. A forgotten irrigation shaft behind the schoolhouse, dug decades ago and long since abandoned, half choked with roots and stagnant water. He used it, crawled through the dark, blood-warm tunnel like a worm through flesh, pushing past roots that felt almost alive. Some clung to his sleeves, others pulsed as he passed, but they let him through, almost as if they recognized him, almost as if they were waiting. The kiln stood empty, not silent, never silent, but patient. Its dome still glowed faintly, like a heart on the verge of sleep. The bricks stacked within steamed softly, sweating memory into the air. He lit the torch, not a ceremonial flame, just kerosene and rag, crude, mortal. He didn't want to feed the kiln, he wanted to kill it. The moment the torch touched the edge of the woodpile, the kiln reacted. A deep, guttural sigh exhaled from its base, like something inside it had stirred. The bricks vibrated. The smoke thickened, turning copper, then red. And from the smoke, whispers. "You were born in us. You pressed your name into our walls. You cannot burn what already belongs to flame." The fire grew. Reed fed it, not with reverence, but with rage. He smashed the ceremonial basin, tore down the prayer scrolls, threw every relic into the growing blaze. But still, the fire did not collapse. It bloomed. And from the kiln's base, the trapdoor opened. Not by force, by invitation. He stared at it. The path downward, the one he'd sworn never to walk again. But the flames would not die above. So he descended. The seed vault had changed. The roots were thicker now. They draped the walls like veins. They pulsed with color, not red, but a deep, wine-dark black. Not alive, not dead. Something in between, limbs that dreamed. The stalk at the vault's center had grown. No longer a torso. Now it had arms, bent and raised in supplication. Its fingertips brushed the ceiling. Me was waiting beside it, not in robes, naked. Her skin smeared with wet clay, her eyes closed, her head tilted as if listening to a song no one else could hear. "You can't kill it," she said softly. "You're part of it, just like Graham was, just like I am." Reed stepped forward. "Then bury me in stone." He lifted the torch and threw it directly into the base of the stalk. The room screamed. Not me, not Reed, the walls, the roots, the bricks. Every memory entombed in every layer of clay wailed. The fire spread, eating through the damp walls, blackening the seed stalk until it split with a sound like splitting bone. Me didn't move. She watched it burn, watched as the stalk cracked and toppled. And then with a soft smile she whispered, "It's not in the root, it's in the clay." Reed turned, too late. The ground beneath his feet was melting, not from heat, from release. Bricks split, veins opened. and from the broken walls spilled not mortar but teeth, bits of bone, eyelashes, names, thousands of names whispered and etched and sung into the red dirt like lullabies. The Covenant wasn't a cult, it was a system, a memory engine built from people who believed if they just gave enough of themselves, they could last forever. Reed ran. He didn't look back. As he scrambled up the kiln stairs, the fire behind him roared higher, devouring not just fuel, but history. It wasn't screaming anymore. It was laughing. He emerged into night. The town was silent, empty, but the wall still stood. And at the very top of the kiln's chimney, the flame remained small, perfect, steady. Unburned, he fell to his knees and realized the truth. The kiln had never needed fuel. It burned on remembrance. And Reed, by trying to kill it, had fed it more than anyone ever had. Chapter 11. What the clay keeps. Reed didn't remember walking to Ruth's hut. He remembered the fire, the screams in the bricks, the feel of bones beneath his feet, popping like overripe fruit, but not the path out, not the hours that must have passed, only the taste of clay in his throat and the feeling that something was still crawling just under his skin. Ruth opened the door before he could knock. She didn't gasp, she didn't scold. She only looked at him with the kind of weariness that comes from having known this moment would come all along. "You opened it," she said. Reed didn't respond. He sat heavily at her table, hands trembling, eyes bloodshot. She poured tea that neither of them touched. "You tried to burn the memory," she said, "but you fed it instead." He finally spoke. "Why? Why doesn't it die?" Ruth sat across from him, quietly unwrapping a clay charm from her wrist, one shaped like an eye, blindfolded. "Because we don't want to forget." The silence between them stretched like a taut thread. Sullen Ridge wasn't built on madness, Reed. It was built on grief. The first settlers lost everything: families, names, roots. The fire didn't start as worship. It started as remembrance, a way to hold on. She touched her own arm. There, beneath her skin, a faint spiral scar glowed dull red. "But we didn't realize memory wants to grow. If you plant it deep enough and feed it with enough blood," she trailed off. Reed whispered, "It blooms." Ruth nodded. "And what blooms hungers." Reed stood, pacing. "Then how do I kill it? I have to finish it. I saw my brother in the roots, his eyes, his ring." He stopped, suddenly breathless, because he wasn't wearing his brother's ring anymore. He'd never taken it off. But now he turned his palm. The skin was darker, redder, the veins twisted like roots beneath stretched clay. Ruth saw it too, her voice cracked. "Reed, how long were you in the vault?" He stumbled backward. "How long?" She stood. Her tone changed, no longer soft, urgent, fearful. "Look at your hands." He did. His fingernails had darkened, ridged like pottery. He touched his cheek. The skin didn't give like flesh. It was firm, pressed. "You're setting," Ruth said, tears brimming. "The clay knows your shape now." Reed ran outside, vomiting in the dirt. The soil hissed where it touched the earth as if rejecting him. He looked to the woods, to the stone mound, to the broken circle. And he realized, even if he fled, the fire would not die. It would follow, because the fire was not in Sullen Ridge anymore. It was in him. He turned to Ruth, whose face had gone pale. "Then I bury myself." She stepped back. "No, Reed, if you do that, if you try to seal the fire again, it won't forget. Not this time. It'll go looking for something else. It always needs names. And you'll drag more into the ground with you." Reed's eyes were distant, still burning, but calm. "I'll bury it where nothing grows." Chapter 12. Where the clay won't bloom, Reed waited until dawn. He told Ruth not to follow. She didn't. She just pressed the cracked spiral pendant back into his palm and whispered. "The stone doesn't forget either. It just chooses not to speak." Then he left. The journey was slower this time. The trees seemed to lean away from him as he passed. The red clay trails hissed beneath his footsteps, steaming faintly like walking across hot breath. Even the birds fell silent. By the time he reached the clearing, the sun had vanished behind thick clouds. The stone mound stood untouched in the center, cold and still, dusted with moss. But as he approached, he felt it, the heat inside him, pulsing, growing. The kiln had never been destroyed. It had just relocated. He knelt beside the mound, the spiral stone warm in his fist. His hands shook. His skin was stiffer now, cracking in places, red along the seams, as though fired in a kiln that lived beneath his ribs. He could barely bend his fingers, but he began digging, not with tools, not with magic, with his hands. Clay hands breaking against unmoving rock, bleeding dust and memory, and the smell of burning rope. Every inch deeper into the stone hurt. It felt like driving fingers into the skull of something old and dreaming. But he kept going. By midday, he found it. Not a hollow, not a cavern, but a chamber, carved by someone generations ago, or something deeper. Inside it, bones, hundreds, small, curled shapes, infant-like, each wrapped in thin bands of dried cloth and clay, names scrawled along the ribs in old dialects. A burial, or a vault, the first attempt to contain the covenant. Reed collapsed beside it. He took the spiral stone from Ruth, pressed it into the chamber wall, then took the last thing he had, the brick, the one with his name, the one that had somehow followed him, found him. He didn't question how it got there. He only knew it wanted to be planted. He wrapped it in the cloth from the chamber, held it to his chest, and lay down in the pit. "Let it end here," he whispered. "Let it stop with me." Then he closed the soil over his body, handful by handful, until he couldn't move, until he couldn't hear the wind, until the only sound was the slow heartbeat of clay hardening in a place where it should never have grown. At the edge of the forest, Ruth stood alone. She saw the smoke rise, just once, not from a fire, from memory exhaling. Then it was gone. In Sullen Ridge, the bricks began to crumble, one by one. The wall broke, the kiln extinguished, the roots retracted, and for the first time in 100 years, the land lay quiet. But far beneath the stone, something whispered still. He gave his name freely. "That is enough." Epilogue Red Earth never forgets. It had been 15 years since the last chimney in Sullen Ridge collapsed under its own weight. The roads had grown over. The wall, now moss-covered and half-swallowed by vines, stood broken in 3 places. No one came looking. No one filed paperwork, no search parties, no historians, just one long, collective forgetting, until a family came, not a cult, not a covenant, just a man, his wife, and their daughter. They were looking for land. Quiet land. They found it. They bought what remained of the ridge at auction, cheap, unlisted, and without explanation. A curious blot on county records. The realtor had never stepped foot on the property. The deed came with no survey. But the soil was perfect. Even in winter, it stayed warm. Even in drought, it stayed dark and rich, crumbling in their hands like wet coffee grounds. The man, a veteran soil engineer from Alabama, had never seen anything like it. "Don't need to rotate a damn thing," he muttered, planting the first tomato vine with his daughter. "It's like something's feeding it from below." The garden took fast, faster than it should have. Within weeks, green exploded across the field. Tomatoes the size of grapefruits. Squash that bent their own stalks with weight. Even the corn grew in spirals, like they were reaching toward something beneath the rows. The daughter, Sarah, found the first brick while chasing her dog near the tree line. It was soft, still warm. Her name wasn't written on it, not yet. But when she held it to her chest, it felt familiar. That night, she asked her father what his middle name was. He paused, touched his chest, and for just a second his fingers came away red. The fire doesn't need worship. The fire doesn't need faith. It only needs a name, and someone willing to press it into the earth. You made it back for now, but the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video, subscribe, but know this, some doors once opened do not close so easily.